Hey folks, Dale Davidson here, the Dear VA Guy. Thank you for tuning in today. Hey look, I know we been doing a lot on the PACT Act lately, but I've got some more updates on the PACT Act, which is the Sergeant First Class Health Robinson honoring our promise to address comprehensive toxics, which the PACT Act. That was enacted back in August of 2022 by President Biden to address long-standing health care benefits and challenges faced by veterans exposed to toxic substances during their military service, including, but not limited to, Agent Orange and other pesticides, burn pits, and radiological things. And we're going to be talking about this throughout this. This is a two-part video, so stay tuned. Again, since its enactment in 2022, the PACT Act has undergone a lot of updates, and we're going to be talking about them today. Congress is trying to expand the reach and impact on millions of veterans, so this is what you need to know about the latest developments. PACT Act is designed to provide comprehensive support for veterans who were exposed to toxic substances, burn pits, Agent Orange, and other hazardous materials during their service. So what this act does and what the updates do is they're expanding eligibility for VA health care, adds new presumptive conditions, and simplifies the benefits application process for affected veterans. So here are the key provisions, and I'm going to break it down. We're going to do 5, and then we're going to do the balance in the next video. Number 1, we expanded eligibility for VA health care. So if you were in the Vietnam War, Gulf War, post 9/11 eras exposed to toxic substances, you're now eligible for VA health care. If you qualify, you don't have to apply for disability compensation before accessing health care. That's a big deal, but you have to apply. Now, there's more than 20 presumptive conditions linked to toxic exposures, such as various cancers and respiratory illnesses. The VA website has a comprehensive list of all of those, so I'm not going to go into them today. So again, what's good about presumptive is that you don't have to prove nexus or connection or direct service connection of these conditions to your service. Normally you would have to say, I have this condition because of my service, but if you have one of those presumptive conditions that are listed on the VA website, you don't have to prove connection to service. So it looks at a broader exposure coverage. The list of recognized locations and timeframes for exposure to Agent Orange and other toxic substances has been expanded, increasing the pool of eligible veterans. So you may not have been in Vietnam, but you might have been in Thailand, or you might have been somewhere else. Just look on the website to see if where you served is a covered area now. Part of the PACT Act is that you've got to get, if you're claiming exposure, you've got to get a mandatory screening. So all veterans enrolled in, when you enroll in VA healthcare, you're going to receive regular toxic exposure screenings to ensure early detection and treatment. And then again, part of this is enhanced research and education to try and help veterans become more educated as to these exposures and research as far as improving the health care. Here come the recent updates. Number 1, there's a phase out of the elimination enrollment date. Okay, so in February 2024, the Department of Veterans Affairs announced the removal of the phase-in enrollment dates under the PACT Act. So this accelerates your access. If you're a veteran and you're eligible, this accelerates your access to VA healthcare, allowing you to enroll years earlier than you initially planned, because you don't have to apply for compensation or disability compensation. All you have to do is enroll in the VA healthcare. Okay, so healthcare eligibility for toxic exposures. If you were exposed to toxic exposures or some kind of environmental hazard during your military service, there are 8 separate criteria in which you may be eligible for VA healthcare. Now, I say maybe because that's how they've worded it to us, is that you're not automatically eligible, but you may be eligible. But you got to get that toxic screen. In addition, if you're a veteran and you are defined as a combat theater veteran, you have an enhanced period of enrollment eligibility during which you may receive care for medical conditions related to your service. So let's talk about Vietnam era and Agent Orange exposed veterans. So this all started back in the 1970s, and politicians began to address the healthcare concerns of our veterans who served in Vietnam. Back in 1981, they started with the passage of the Veterans Healthcare Training and Small Business Loan Act. I don't know where they come up with these names. But anyway, so the act granted Vietnam veterans priority status for healthcare at VA facilities by recognizing that your report as a veteran, your own report of exposure, as sufficient proof to receive medical care, unless there was evidence to the contrary. There's always an unless with the VA, okay? So beware. You don't have to prove nexus unless the VA determines that your condition did not result from exposure to Agent Orange, or unless a condition has been identified by the National Academy of Sciences as having, they say, quote, limited suggestive evidence of no association. So if you've got a presumptive condition, you don't have to prove nexus. But if you have another condition that is not presumptive, you would have to prove nexus. There's got to be some kind of scientific data to support your diagnosis and your nexus connection with your military service. Again, the VA is looking at current medical evidence, current medical science to determine if your disability may be related to your exposure while in Vietnam. Now we're here in 2022, the Honoring Our PACT Act amended the definition of veteran era herbicide exposed to include the following. So if you're a veteran who served on active military, you couldn't have been inactive, you couldn't have been National Guard or anything like that, but active military service, naval, air, space service. Wait a minute, how did space service get in there? So, by the way, that branch was created in 2019, but they did participate in the Gulf Wars, so that's why they're included. So if you were in the Republic of Vietnam from January 1962 and ending in May of 1975, Thailand at any United States or Royal Thai base during the period beginning, again, with January 1962 and ending in June of 1976. Now, if you were in Laos during the period of, I think it's December 1965 and ending September of 1969. And there's some other areas, Cambodia and all of that. If you were in those areas, just shoot me an email and we'll respond with those dates. If you were Guam or America Samoa or in the territorial waters off those areas from January of 1962 and ending in July of 1980, or served on the Johnston Atoll or on a ship that called on the Johnston Atoll during that period, you're eligible. Okay? And the VA has a catch-all where you may be considered a Vietnam era herbicide exposed veteran if the VA finds that you were exposed during active service, not inactive service, but active service, to dioxins during the Vietnam era, regardless of where you were, or were exposed during such service to a toxic substance found in those areas. And I'm just off the top of my head, maybe you were on a U.S. Air Force base somewhere other than these areas and you were loading the Agent Orange bombs and they were leaking. I don't know, you exposed to it that way. That would be considered a catch-all. But realize in all of this that your medical evidence and your service records are critical. We've got to have some medical evidence that you are actually have these conditions, this cancer or whatever it may be, that is related to your exposure to the Agent Orange or the dioxins, okay? So if you are an eligible veteran, you're eligible for hospital care, medical services, and nursing home care. You're not eligible in cases where the VA determines that your condition was not as a result of your exposure to Agent Orange. That's where your medical records are very critical. And if you can get your medical professional to provide you a nexus statement. I know nexus is not required, but if you could get your medical provider to say that it's as likely or not that your exposure to this toxic substance while you were in service in Vietnam as a result resulted in your disability or injury, that's what you need, okay? You don't have to pay any co-pays, third-party bills for hospital care, medical services, nursing home care, or medication prescribed on an outpatient basis for any condition that's related to your herbicide exposure. So that's good news. No bills, all right? Number 5. This is the last one we'll be covering in this video. The rest will be covered in the next video. And we're talking about radiation-exposed veterans. Now we're talking about the Veterans Health Care Training and Small Business Loan Act of 1981. So if your condition may have resulted from radiation exposure, you're treated just like a Vietnam-era herbicide-exposed veteran. So if you were on active duty and you engaged or participated in they call it radiation risk activity, as well as individuals who, if you were in the reserves, you covered, okay, you participated in a radiation risk activity during your active duty for training or inactive duty training, then again, you can be eligible for hospital care, medical services, nursing home care for listed presumptive diseases or any other disease for which there's credible evidence showing a positive connection. And just like Vietnam era veterans for Agent Orange, you don't have to pay any co-pays, third-party bills for hospital care, medical services, nursing home care, and medications prescribed on an outpatient basis. So the PACT Act of 2022 amended the definition of radiation risk activity to include veterans who took part in the cleanup of Initwok Atoll. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. I'm sure somebody will let me know if I did or didn't. From January of 1977 through December 31 of 1980, veterans who served in the cleanup of the collision of the B-52 bomber over Spain in January of 1966 through March of 1967, and if you were involved in the cleanup and decontamination effort of a B-52 bomber crash in Greenland in January of 1968, then you may be eligible, okay? So this expanded definition of radiation risk activity includes on-site participation in tests involving atmospheric detonation of nuclear devices. If you were in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, Japan during August of 1945 to July 1946, if you were a prisoner of war in Japan or served in active duty in Japan immediately following the internment during World War II, then you possibly exposed to radiation risk. You could have been active duty, but if you also served in any capacity as an employee of the Department of Energy, you may qualify for inclusion as a member of the special exposure cohort under the law. So you could be covered also if you were an employee of the Department of Energy. Hey folks, thank you for joining me today. Hey, look, I did a previous video, the PACT Act update. This was a little bit more detailed today, but hey, go back and check out that video also. And until next time, you have a blessed day.